Okay, so get this. What if, like, your IQ isn't actually set in stone?
Interesting.
Yeah. What if it's like more of a landscape, and it kind of shifts based on like what you go through in life, your experiences.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Well, today we're diving deep into research that looks at how stuff like genetics, how our brains are structured, and this crazy thing called epigenetics, all of that might be impacting our intelligence.
So we're kind of moving past that whole nature versus nurture debate.
Totally. It's way more complex than that.
Way more.
Yeah. So we're looking at this article from Translational Psychiatry where researchers studied over 1,400 teenagers.
Teenagers? Huh.
Yeah, I know. You might be thinking, okay, I haven't been a teenager in forever, but stick with us because trust me, this stuff matters for like everyone. Like whether you're trying to learn something new, boost your own brain power, or even just understand how younger minds develop, this deep dive has got something for you.
It's all about understanding how these different things can shape intelligence.
Exactly.
And then using that knowledge to create learning environments that, really help people thrive.
Right. So to start with, let's break down this whole genetics thing. The researchers, they use something called a polygenic score.
Polygenic score.
Yeah.
Sounds complicated.
It does sound super complicated, I know, but it's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay, break it down for me.
All right. So think of it like you're baking a cake, right? You wouldn't just expect one ingredient, like say just the flour, to determine how the whole cake's going to taste, right?
Right, it's the combination of everything.
Exactly. It's all those ingredients working together. A polygenic score is kind of like that. It measures how a bunch of different genes, not just one, might be linked to a trait, in this case, like IQ.
I see. So it's not just one gene, it's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, exactly. And get this, they used two different polygenic scores in this study. One was from a study on children, and then the other was based on like a much larger, more diverse group of adults.
Two different scores, huh?
Yep. And here's what's crazy. Both scores, both of them actually predicted IQ in these teenagers. But the one based on the adult data, that was even more accurate.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Isn't that wild? It just shows you, like genetic research, it's always evolving. The more we learn, the more complex, the more exciting this picture becomes.
That's sure. And we're just getting started.
Totally. It's like we're just scratching the surface of how genes influence intelligence. But hold on tight, because things are about to get even wilder when we enter the world of epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
Yeah. This field is like blowing my mind lately. It's like we're discovering this whole other level of control that's like happening on top of our DNA.
I'm all ears.
Okay, so imagine your DNA is the hardware of a computer. It's, the fixed code. But epigenetics, that's more like the software, the programs that actually determine how that hardware is used.
Okay, so it's not just the hardware, it's how you use it.
Exactly. And get this, it can actually like dial up or down the activity of certain genes, and it does all that without even changing the underlying DNA sequence.
So it's like a volume control for your genes.
Yeah. So it's not just the genes you're born with, it's how those genes are being like expressed, right?
I'm starting to see how this all connects.
It's wild. And this study, they specifically looked at epigenetic changes to this one gene called DRD2. Now, if you're into neuroscience, you might recognize that one.
DRD2 rings a bell. It's involved in dopamine, right?
You got it. It's involved in making those dopamine receptors. And dopamine, well, that's a neurotransmitter that plays a huge role in all sorts of things like pleasure, motivation, reward, the whole works.
Dopamine, the good stuff.
Right. And here's the really interesting part. They found that like an epigenetic modification of this DRD2 gene was linked to IQ scores. It's like what we experience, it can actually tweak like the volume knob on certain genes, and that tweaking, that might be impacting, our cognitive abilities.
Whoa. So our experiences can actually change how our genes work.
It seems that way. It really makes you think about intelligence differently.
Yeah.
It's not just like this fixed thing. And it makes you wonder like what kinds of experiences are actually causing these epigenetic shifts,
Right. And how can we use that knowledge to help people reach their full potential?
Huge questions. And that's where the study gets even more interesting. They didn't stop at genetics and epigenetics. They also looked at like brain structure using MRI scans.
Okay. So they're looking inside the brain now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Specifically, they were checking out the density of gray matter in a part of the brain called the striatum.
The striatum.
Yeah. It's a region that's like super important for processing rewards, like how we form habits, even controlling our movements.
Interesting. And remind me, What was that DRD2 gene all about again?
Oh, well, remember, it was all about dopamine receptors, right?
Right.
Well, guess what? The striatum, it's like packed with those receptors for dopamine. It's like everything's starting to, connect here.
Whoa. So genes, epigenetics, brain structure, it's all linked.
Yeah, it's all intertwined. It really highlights how these things, they all play together, and we're just beginning to untangle how they all contribute to, like, something as complex as intelligence.
This is getting really deep.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So the study, what they found was that people with more gray matter in the striatum, they also tended to have higher IQs. Like brain structure, it isn't just like set in stone either. It can be shaped by our experiences, which is like pretty amazing when you think about it.
So it's not just our genes, it's also how our brains are wired.
Exactly. And that wiring, it can change based on what we do, the experiences we have. It adds like a whole other layer to how we understand IQ. It's not just about what's written in our DNA, it's about how our brains are like physically wired.
And that wiring can change. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Right. So we've got genetics, we've got epigenetics, we've got brain structure. Are you ready for the final piece of the puzzle?
Hit me with it. I'm hooked.
Okay, so remember how we talked about the striatum? How it's all about rewards?
Yeah, the reward center.
Well, the researchers, they use this special brain imaging technique called fMRI to see what actually happens in the brain when people are anticipating something good, when they're expecting something good to happen.
The anticipation of reward, like when you're waiting to open a present, or that feeling you get when the dessert menu comes around after dinner.
Yes, exactly that. That's the ventral striatum. It's like a part of the striatum lighting up. And what they found, get this, people who showed stronger activation in that ventral striatum during this anticipation task, they also tended to have higher IQ scores.
So the more excited you get about a reward, the higher your IQ.
Well, it's more nuanced than that, but it's interesting, right?
Totally. It's making me rethink how we view dopamine. It's not just about pleasure or motivation. It's like the fuel for our thoughts.
I know, right? Makes you wonder, what kinds of things can we do? What kind of experiences can we design to keep those dopamine circuits firing, to maybe boost our cognitive abilities?
That's a fascinating question, but doesn't that sound a bit like we're trying to hack the brain? I mean, if we're figuring out how to crank up dopamine to learn better, are we messing with something that should be natural?
That's a really good point. It's a question we need to think about carefully. As we learn more about how the brain's reward system works and how it relates to, how we think, we got to be cautious, Yeah. We got to be ethical about how we use this knowledge.
Absolutely. There's a lot to consider.
There is. Okay, I think I need a moment to just process all this. We've just uncovered so much about how our brains work and all the different factors that go into intelligence. One thing's for sure, it's way more complicated than we thought.
Agreed. And we're just at the beginning of this whole journey of discovery. Who knows what we'll find next?
Right. Well, on that note, I think we need to give our listeners a chance to digest all this awesome info. We'll be back soon to explore what all this research means for, how we learn and how we live our lives.
Looking forward to it.
All right, welcome back. I don't know about you, but after that last segment, my brain is still buzzing. It's pretty amazing to think about intelligence not being this fixed thing, you know, but something that's constantly changing and being shaped by so many things.
It really changes the way we think about, learning and potential.
Totally.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing intelligence as just this one-dimensional score, a number.
Right.
We're starting to appreciate how complex it is and the potential it has for growth.
Exactly. It's like we've been looking at intelligence through a narrow lens for way too long.
Yeah, for sure.
What if we zoomed out, and considered the whole individual, their genetics, their life experiences, how their brain is uniquely wired.
It's instead of just giving someone an IQ test and being okay, this is your score.
Yeah.
We can be all right, here's a map of your cognitive landscape.
I like that.
Yeah. Let's explore this together and find the best ways for you to learn and grow.
That's a great metaphor, a cognitive landscape. It really captures how dynamic and multifaceted intelligence is.
It does. And just a landscape can change over time, with right care and attention.
Right.
So too can our cognitive abilities.
I like that.
Yeah. And this research gives us some concrete places to start with, how to nurture those abilities.
Yeah. Okay.
We know experiences can impact epigenetics, brain structure, even how active dopamine is.
So the question is, what kind of experiences should we be focusing on?
Well, the study itself doesn't give us like, step-by-step instructions,
Right.
but it definitely points us in some pretty interesting directions.
Yeah.
Like, remember that reward anticipation task?
Yeah, yeah.
What if we could design like learning experiences
Yeah.
that tap into those same neural pathways,
Yeah.
those same feelings of like excitement and anticipation.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. So instead of, just rote memorization and like dry lectures, what if learning felt more like a game?
A game, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
where you're like constantly challenged and rewarded for, the progress you make.
Interesting.
I think that would keep me engaged, that's for sure.
And those rewards, they don't have to be like physical things,
Yeah, okay.
Like it could be the feeling of satisfaction when you master a new skill or the joy of like collaborating with others or just that sense of accomplishment when you push past a challenge.
Right. It's like we're talking about harnessing that power of dopamine to like make learning more engaging and effective. That's pretty cool.
Definitely.
But I can't help but like think about the ethics of it all,
Okay, yeah.
Are we like manipulating people's brains to make them smarter? Where's the line between like enhancement and manipulation?
That's a really important point, and it's something we have to be very careful about. The goal isn't to like artificially inflate people's IQ scores or create some kind of, super intelligence. It's about understanding the natural mechanisms that drive how we learn and think.
Right.
And using that knowledge responsibly to create more effective, and engaging educational experiences.
Right. It's not about like forcing the brain to learn in ways it's not meant to.
Exactly.
It's more about creating the optimal conditions for growth.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like a gardener.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't force a plant to grow in some way that goes against its nature.
Right.
It's about like providing the right nutrients, the right sunlight, the right support.
Absolutely. And just like a garden thrives on diversity, so do our minds.
Oh, that's a good point.
What works for one person, might not work for another.
Right.
That's why it's so important to recognize individual differences and tailor those learning experiences to those differences.
So if we're thinking of like education as this cognitive gardening.
I like it.
What are like the key ingredients we need to nurture those budding brains?
Well, based on this research, it seems like we need to pay a lot more attention to reward and motivation in learning.
Yeah.
We need to create environments that are, stimulating, engaging, places where people feel like they're making progress and accomplishing things.
So like no more boring lectures,
Yeah.
endless worksheets, or like standardized tests that just measure, how well you can memorize stuff.
Well, ideally, yes.
Okay.
I mean, structure and assessment, they'll always have a place in education, but we need to find ways to make learning more brain-friendly, more aligned with, how we naturally learn and grow.
This research is so exciting.
Yeah.
It's not just about like understanding how our brains work. It's about using that knowledge to create a better future for all of us, for generations to come.
Yeah, imagine a world where education is like tailored to individual strengths and differences, where, children aren't just taught, but they're really inspired to learn and grow. That's the kind of potential this research unlocks.
Wow, that's a powerful vision. And it's not just about kids, right?
No, not at all.
This applies to all of us,
Right.
no matter how old we are. We can all benefit from understanding how our brains work and finding ways to optimize our own cognitive landscapes.
Absolutely. Lifelong learning, it's not just a nice idea.
Yeah.
It's essential in a world that's constantly changing and evolving. The more we understand about the brain, the better equipped we'll be to adapt and grow and thrive.
So we've talked a lot about like the potential benefits of this research.
Right.
But are there any like potential downsides or risks we should be aware of? I mean, knowledge is power, but it can be misused, right?
You bring up a really important point. Ethical considerations are like absolutely paramount in this field.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that this knowledge is used responsibly and not for purposes that could, harm or exploit people.
Well, we don't want a society where people are like judged or categorized based on their genetic predispositions or brain scans.
Exactly.
Everyone deserves the chance to reach their full potential no matter, where they start.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to, bring this research into the open and make sure it's used to promote equity and opportunity for everyone.
It's where science and society, intersect.
Yeah.
It's where we need to have those tough conversations and hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
I mean, the future of intelligence, maybe even the future of humanity, might depend on it.
Well said. And remember, these conversations, they're not just for, scientists and policymakers.
Right.
It's up to all of us to engage, to ask questions, and to demand that this knowledge is used for good.
I'm feeling pretty inspired by all this. So what can our listeners do, to learn more and get involved? Are there any resources or organizations you recommend?
Absolutely. There's so much information out there online in your communities.
Okay.
For starters, I'd recommend checking out insert names of relevant organizations or resources here. You could also look into online courses on neuroscience, epigenetics, things like that.
And don't forget the power of just talking about it.
Oh, right.
Talk to your friends, your family, colleagues,
Yeah.
About these ideas. The more we share this knowledge, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this, this whole complex and constantly changing world of intelligence.
Well said. Remember, intelligence, it's not like a fixed entity.
Right.
It's a dynamic process that we can all, shape and influence throughout our lives. The key is to stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop learning.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored how genetics, epigenetics, brain structure, and dopamine, they all work together to shape our cognitive abilities. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
Oh, okay, go for it. I'm listening.
So we know that our experiences can impact, gene activity, how our brains are structured, even how dopamine signals.
Right.
But what about the reverse? What if, changes in our cognitive abilities, changes in our intelligence, could actually influence our biology?
Okay.
Could learning a new skill or mastering a new concept, could that actually change our genes or, how our brains are structured?
Now that is a fascinating question. And it's one that science is just starting to explore. There's some pretty cool evidence that suggests that, our minds can actually shape our biology, but we're still in the early stages of understanding how all of this works.
It's incredible to think that what we think and what we do could have such a profound impact on our physical selves.
Yeah, it really speaks to how incredibly plastic and adaptable the human brain is.
Yeah.
And it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for understanding human potential.
It does. I can't wait to see what future research uncovers. It feels like we're really on the verge of a whole new understanding of how connected our minds and bodies really are.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be alive and to be witnessing these scientific breakthroughs. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a much bigger exploration.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive. But don't go anywhere, because in part 3, we'll be diving into some of the practical applications of this research. We'll be sharing tips and strategies for how to optimize your own cognitive landscape.
I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've explored some pretty complex stuff, about intelligence, all the way from genes and epigenetics to how our brains are wired and the role of dopamine.
It's been a wild ride through the world of cognitive science.
Yeah, it has. But now let's get practical, right? How can we actually use this knowledge to boost our own brain power?
Okay, so we're talking a toolkit for brain health and cognitive enhancement.
Exactly. Think of it that way. We'll be drawing on what we've learned from the study, but also, tapping into other cool research in this field.
Sounds good.
So let's start with dopamine, right? The study really highlighted how important it is for how our brains work. It's not just about feeling good. It's the fuel that powers our thinking,
Right. It's essential for learning, memory, focus, the whole 9 yards. So the big question is, how do we naturally boost those dopamine levels?
Well, some of the answers might actually surprise you. It's not all about complicated brain exercises or, taking supplements. Turns out something as simple as exercise can be a huge dopamine booster.
Really?
Yeah. Even just a quick walk or a few jumping jacks can make a difference.
I can definitely vouch for that. A little bit of movement always helps me, clear my head and feel more focused.
Right.
Another thing that works really well is setting small, achievable goals.
Wait, hold on. Explain that. How does that connect to dopamine?
Well, each time you achieve a goal, even if it's, a small one, your brain, it releases a little burst of dopamine. It's like a mini celebration.
Okay.
And it reinforces that behavior, so you're more likely to keep going.
So it's like it creates this positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
The more you achieve, the more you want to achieve.
Precisely. And don't forget about doing things you genuinely enjoy, whether it's listening to music, spending time with people you care about, or getting lost in a hobby. Those things, they all trigger dopamine release, and they contribute to, your overall well-being, which is super important.
So basically taking care of, our mental and emotional health is just as important as like physical health when it comes to our brains.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
It is. It is. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about epigenetics.
Uh-huh.
We learned that our experiences can actually change how our genes are expressed. It's like flipping these tiny switches on our DNA.
Right. We have more control than we thought.
It's mind-blowing. So what can we do to encourage those positive epigenetic changes, the ones that, are good for our brains?
One of the most important things is managing stress.
Okay.
Because chronic stress, that can trigger changes that are bad for your brain.
I can imagine. Stress management is easier said than done these days, right?
It definitely takes effort. But things like mindfulness practices like meditation or yoga have been shown to be really helpful. Also, spending time in nature, exercise, getting enough sleep, all those things.
Those are good for everything, not just our brain.
Exactly. It's about taking care of the whole system. And don't underestimate the power of social connection.
Oh, great.
Talking to a friend, spending time with loved ones, even just petting a dog. These things can release oxytocin, and that can actually counteract the effects of stress.
It's like a built-in stress buster.
Exactly. We just got to remember to use it.
Okay, so we've covered dopamine, epigenetics. What about brain structure? The study found that link between gray matter and IQ, right? More gray matter, better brain power.
Right. But here's the amazing part. We can actually increase gray matter density through something called neuroplasticity. It's basically the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout our lives.
Wait, so you're saying our brains can rewire themselves?
They can. It's incredible.
Wow.
And there are certain activities that have been shown to boost that neuroplasticity and increase gray matter. One of the most effective is learning a new language. It's like a full-on brain workout.
Okay, so time to dust off that Spanish textbook.
Exactly. Musical training is also fantastic. Playing an instrument or singing engages so many different areas of the brain. Motor control, auditory processing, memory. It's like a full brain orchestra.
I like that.
And then, of course, there's good old-fashioned aerobic exercise. Increases gray matter volume, especially in the hippocampus, which is essential for memory. And of course, we can't forget about sleep, crucial for, brain health and consolidating those memories.
So exercise, new languages, music, sleep. Sounds like a pretty solid recipe for a healthy, high-functioning brain.
It really is. It's about, giving your brain the right ingredients to thrive.
It is. Is there anything else we can do to fine-tune our cognitive landscape?
There are a ton of brain training apps and programs out there. They all claim to, boost brain power. While the evidence is still, being debated, some studies do show some promising results.
So they're worth checking out.
Definitely worth exploring. Just be sure to look for programs that are, evidence-based, personalized, and engaging, and steer clear of anything that promises quick fixes or unrealistic results.
Right. It's a journey, not a sprint.
Exactly. Cognitive enhancement takes time and effort.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So to wrap it all up, we have a lot of tools at our disposal to, support our brain health and boost our cognitive function. It's about taking a holistic approach, right?
Yeah.
Nourishing our brains with, healthy habits and seeking out activities that really stimulate our minds.
Exactly. And the best part is it's never too late to start. Neuroplasticity is a lifelong gift. So no matter how old you are, you can make positive changes that benefit your brain.
I love that. It's never too late to learn and grow.
Exactly.
Well, to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and give you some tools to, take charge of your own cognitive journey. The brain is amazing, capable of so much growth and adaptation. Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep those brains buzzing.
Couldn't have said it better myself.